Recording in progress. Okay, we're just waiting for a few more people. Okay, guys, if you could please turn your cameras off, that'd be much appreciated. I'm going to mute everybody. John, if you could unmute yourself though, John.
Okay.
Perfect. That worked well. No.
Getting a bit
There we
feedback.
go. Yeah, no, I found it and I fixed it. Okay, let's go on with this. So welcome to a chat with, this is going to be a new regular event where I have a chat with a range of IEMT trainers, practitioners and clients to help everybody get a better understanding of what this therapy is all about and how you can use it. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matt Kendall. I'm an advanced IEMT practitioner and also an approved trainer, and my background is in hypnotherapy. I now focus my time on training people in IEMT with my online practitioner course, and I have a range of people attending, including mental health nurses, NLPers, EMDR therapists, hypnotherapists, counsellors, talk therapists, and also people with no therapy experience at all. And I will mention just at the end just about the next training if you're interested in trainings as well. So tonight's talk is going to be approximately 1 hour in length, and it is being recorded. Please make a note of any questions you have, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. To ask a question, just put it into the chat box and I'll be able to read it. We are likely to run over an hour with the questions. So on to tonight's speaker. So John Martin Moore is a therapist, a trainer of IEMT. We actually trained together to become trainers. He first started learning and practicing with hypnosis in 1996 and then became a full-time professional in 2008. John is here to demonstrate some of his recent work working with psoriasis, and he'll be answering questions about this at the end. Now, this is a truly fascinating use of IEMT to create outcomes for psoriasis clients, and the wider reaching applications of this with medical stuff is potentially huge. So I'm going to hand you over to John Martin Moore.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, well, hello everybody, and thanks for coming out on this horrible, cold, wintry night. I'm going to be, like Matt says, just going through some of the work that I do with psoriasis and my clients. I don't just work with psoriasis, I work with lots of different areas, addictions and other things, but what I'm going to focus on this evening is my work around 4 particular clients and the results that I've been getting. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so where's the first page? Okay, so basically we've got 7 types of psoriasis. What I'm going to be talking about this evening is the most common form. It's called plaque psoriasis, and I'm going to be showing you some of the results that I've got with clients that I've worked with. The other types of psoriasis that basically all come from, in my opinion, from the same type of issues. Some of those I'll be going through, but basically the different distinctions and the names of psoriasis, they're probably all caused by the same type of thing. Just the way that they appear on the skin looks different. Okay, so what is plaque psoriasis? It's a condition that causes red and crusty patches of skin covered with silvery scales. It looks pretty bad. It's not life-threatening, but for anybody that has to live with it, definitely for most of their life, it will come and go in what we call flare-ups. It will get bad and then it might go down. There's no real definite idea. People don't really know why this happens, but there's a huge industry on treating the symptoms of psoriasis with lots of topical creams, biotics, everything from sun lamps and all kinds of stuff. So what we've got is the probable cause of psoriasis is what is a very general sort of idea, identified as basically a problem with the immune system. Now that's quite a generalization, and so it's not really satisfactory for me. Okay, so what the science says is through numerous scientific communities that contribute to the research around it, it still remains unidentified. Okay, so that was published in 2016, and if you go look around anywhere for any information on psoriasis, this is what you'll basically come up with every time. Okay, the World Health Organization, patients with psoriasis report experiencing anger, helplessness, high rate of suicidal ideation and in other patients. And in a study of 127 people with psoriasis, almost 10% reported to wish they were dead. So it's a nasty thing. It's a very uncomfortable thing. Socially, it's, you know, people get rejected and opinionated. People can't go on holiday, can't, you know, feel comfortable stripping off and sunbathing or going for a swim, which actually exasperates the problem because sunshine is actually really good for the skin in short amounts. Okay, so again, the World Health Organization looks around understanding what causes the triggers. What they're saying is several trigger factors have been identified leading to the first manifestation of psoriasis, or flares, of a stable chronic disease. Understanding and minimizing these triggers can be an important part of managing psoriasis. So they recognize that the triggers are an important part of it. They don't really go into what causes it. At the bottom there, you can see where I've highlighted, stress represents a strong aggravated factor for psoriasis in both adults and children, regardless of the nature of the stressor. Okay. And what the Google says, if you search Google, the top answer, psoriasis is a common long-term chronic disease with no cure. So it's pretty consistent right across all of the different areas of people who work or know about psoriasis. And this basically comes up with anybody who's worked or knows about IEMT as the fifth pattern chronicity. And it's probably the reason why over the last 5 years I've been offering free work with people to work on the psoriasis, and really very, very few uptakes on it. So it's the case of the person at effect will always seek treatment rather than change. Now, if they're being told there is no cure, this sets up sufferers to always depend on looking for treatment rather than making changes. All right. So, what is emotional stress? Stress is the feeling of being overwhelmed or unable to cope with mental or emotional pressure. It did not evolve for dealing with recent mammalian innovations. So the common stress that a lot of people deal with is chronic. However, our short-term stress was evolved to get us motivated and moving quickly. What it does is it switches the autonomic nervous system into sympathetic fight or flight response. Long-term stress, however, it acts as a continuous activation of the sympathetic nervous system. It increases wear and tear when it's switched, and when it's switched on, basically blood supply to non-vital organs like ovulation, sperm production, cell repair and digestion get switched off. So basically what we're seeing here is every time it gets a trigger, the adrenaline glands will pump out a load of adrenaline, and the 8 pints of blood or so that we have in the body will pump the big muscles, and it will empty out the digestion and non-vital organs. The idea is if we've survived that threat response, that fight or flight situation that we're in, then it all gets switched back on again. But modern life is, as you know, we've got these constant worries about things on the TV, on the news, bills to pay, and ongoing problems. Okay, so what I did is I noticed there was a question asked on one of the psoriasis forums, and I took some copies of what people responded to. So as 50 people answered the question, do you have any other illness with psoriasis, especially autoimmune diseases? Now, I had to squeeze in all of the answers on the right-hand side. And what you can see from that is there's a lot of people that identifying with having diabetes, a lot of people with Hashimoto. I don't even know what that is. They've got depression, they've got migraines, osteoporosis, all kinds of different stuff, all kinds of autoimmune diseases that these people are living with. Now, out of all of the people that answered questions, over the 50 people that answered, only 2 people actually mentioned that they didn't have any other autoimmune diseases. So there's a very common thread going through there with people with psoriasis mostly have, I would say 90% of them actually do have other diseases, autoimmune diseases. Okay, so let's move on. So what's the psychology of stress? Now, I'm a big fan of Robert Sapolsky, works from Stanford University. He runs a lot of videos online. And he says, when you're stressed, you turn off everything that's not essential to surviving, such as digestion, growth, and reproduction. Studies show that stress suppresses the immune system, making you more susceptible to infectious diseases, and can even shut down reproduction by causing erectile dysfunction and disrupting menstrual cycles. So, you know, if you think about people with chronic stress, having problems with, you know, basically not being able to get pregnant, and all kinds of stuff. I've actually had quite a few clients that I've worked with anxiety problems. And on a follow-up session a year later, they, you know, 2 or 3 of them, I think 3 of them in total, have reported that they've actually got pregnant, something that they never thought was even possible. So the problem is with that is you have to take their word on it, testimonials, and in the world that we live, a lot of therapists and a lot of stuff that people claim to have fixed and done is fabricated. And so, you know, I find the interesting thing about psoriasis is you can actually see the before and after pictures, and it's quite clear, you know, that the results are there. Okay, so what else does he say? Non-life-threatening stressors, such as constantly worrying about money or pleasing your boss, also trigger the release of adrenaline and other stress hormones, which over time can have devastating consequences to your health. He said, if you turn on the stress response chronically for purely psychological reasons, you increase your risk of adult onset diabetes, high blood pressure. If you're chronically shutting down the digestive system, there's a bunch of gastrointestinal disorders you're more likely to be at risk at as well. Okay, so how do I switch off chronic stress? $64 million question. Is that $64,000 question? $1 million maybe. What I'm doing really is changing a reflex reaction into a conditioned reaction. And working with IEMT, what we talk about is building resources inside of the problem state. Basically, it's about changing how our autonomic nervous system would typically react in any given situation. So instead of having a reaction, the brain has a moment to respond and basically deal with the situation. But the problem is these reactive impulses are often unconscious. We're not really aware of them. It's a little bit like sometimes you might get a feeling that somebody's watching you, you know. But really, what's happening is unconsciously your body is not. Your body's responding to that, but you're not consciously aware of it. And so what we're doing with the IEMT model is we're actually accessing those unconscious triggers, and then we're building resources inside of that so that the person has a moment to respond instead of react. Okay, so after the running the process around a bad memory, the clients will often report a change in perspective, a sense of stepping away from danger, a reduction in feelings about the bad memory, and they will say things like, I just don't care about it anymore. They just don't care that much about it anymore. So during the session, often clients will release emotions. They may laugh, they may cry, or they may do both. And at the end, they'll often just sigh and say, yeah, meh, whatever, you know. Okay, so and when I ask them about how does it feel when they think about that particular issue of guilt or shame or anxiety or whatever it was, they'll report a reduction in time. Just a moment, I think my computer is... Excuse me. So when I ask them, how does it feel when you think about that problem? On a score of 10, they'll report reduction each time I run the algorithm. Okay, so for anyone who's a bit geeky and into the neuroscience of this, of how we actually switch from a reflex reaction into a condition reaction, then I would advise you to pick up Robert Sapolsky's book, Behave, and turn it to page 54, where he goes into quite in-depth detail. He can explain it a lot better than I can. Okay, so in my opinion, psoriasis is due to excess toxins being released because of stress. Okay. During the stress response, the cycle of the epidermis skin cells don't get repaired. What happens is they get replaced. Each new cycle of skin production builds up as plaques. So if a normal person basically changes or replaces the epidermis layer of skin around about once a month, somebody with chronic stress or who's been triggering regularly or constantly, you know, with a high level of chronic stress, their skin cells are reproducing around about 4-7 times faster, something like that. What that does is it basically just builds up and builds up on the surface. And as for the other comorbidity issues, first you must consider that you have enough endotoxins in you to kill an elephant. So they come from the gut biome. So inside of in your gut, you have around about 3 to 4 pounds, or maybe about 2 kilos of bacteria. Estimates are around about 5 trillion or something like that. And they're clever and they're intelligent, and they basically talk to one another using a thing called quorum sensing, and they can adapt, and there is switcher epigenetics in order to identify, you know, what foods arrive in, and so basically they live in a symbiotic relationship with us. And what they do is they provide us with around about 25% of all of our vitamins. They help us build an immunity, but they're basically alien to us, and they live inside of us, and we work with them in order to, you know, get some kind of relationship. So the problem is when they die, they give off endotoxins, and there's a lot of bacteria there. So every time the blood runs away to trigger the fight or flight response, what happens is that builds up and builds up, and then it can leak through the gut wall, causing all kinds of havoc. So what we've got there is we normally need a fresh flow of blood going through there in what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. When we trigger the sympathetic nervous system, what ends up there is a whole flood of basically what we call leaky gut. And so this, I personally believe that's what's causing a lot of the autoimmune problems people have and the comorbidity issues. But for today, we're just basically working on the psoriasis. But as you can see from the previous slide, there's a lot of people who do have other issues related to chronic stress. Okay, so your immune system is not broken. It's just doing its job. There will be a backlog of toxins to mop up what we call leaky gut syndrome when blood flow finally returns to the colon area. All right. So there's up to 2 kilos of bacteria in the gut. This means the colon has enough endotoxins to kill around 30 people. Some parts of the gut is only 1 cell thick. And when you get stressed, the visceral blood leaves the non-vital organs in order to supply the big muscles. Dead bacteria give off endotoxins, and this leaks through the gut wall, which causes what's been termed leaky gut syndrome. But remember, stress switches off blood flow, leaving the gut unprotected. Also, we notice the thyroid helps to regulate our metabolism. One of the things the thyroid does is produce basically the hormones, a couple of hormones that are being produced by the thyroid gland. If they do not get enough iodine, which helps to build and use those to help create those hormones, then what happens is you get these thyroid problems. One of the things the thyroid does, the hormones does, is it affects and adapts or what's called the basal metabolic rate, and that is something which makes it stabilizes our weight control. So if our gut is switched off and there's no, it's not working, it's not digestion, then the iodine will get cut off, and this in turn will affect the thyroid, so it won't operate properly. Now, when stress gets triggered, it switches off digestion, and you may run out of iodine, and so also for the hormone production there. Okay, so what happens to the immune system during stress? When we're stressed, the immune system's ability to fight off antigens is reduced. An antigen may be a substance from the environment, such as chemicals, bacteria, viruses, or pollen. Lots of chemicals are found in processed food. The idea of processed food is basically a whole food will be taken and separated into separate parts. It will be salted, it will be smoked, it will be steamed, it will be frozen, it will be all kinds of stuff, and then other processes put into it to make it taste and more palatable, easier to digest, you less work chewing it, etc., etc. But what happens there is when food is dismantled and processed like this, what it tends to do is it removes omega-3 from the food and increases an omega-6. So in my opinion, I think a lot of people are deficient of omega-3, even though it's one of the most abundant oils, essential oils in the world. It's found in every single plant. But what we end up doing is we end up buying fish oils, cod liver oil to try and get back some of that omega-3. The problem is with that is if we have an abundance of omega-6, that will act as a blocker to the omega-3 in the first place. So there's no shortcut around to get an extra omega-3. Basically, you have to cut out all the processed food and take care of your diet that way. However, some of the work that I've been doing with my clients, they simply try to change their diet. They've cleaned up the diet and removed the processed food, but without the IEMT process, which I'll show you later on with one of my clients, they didn't make any improvements. So changing the diet alone, it doesn't really fix the problem. The triggering of the chronic stress is what causes, I believe, a lot of the toxins to get released into the system. So the stress hormone cortisol, corticosteroid can suppress the effectiveness of the immune system, e.g. it lowers the number of lymphocytes. Steroid treatment attract the immune system by suppressing its effectiveness. Okay, so what I'm going to do is look at 4 of my clients. And we're going to go through some of the way that I works with them and some of the pictures and details. The first client I've got is a face-to-face client, which made it into a case study. Okay, so it's a 49-year-old male with a history PTSD. He had epilepsy and psoriasis for half a year. So I'll be talking about that. The second client is a recent face-to-face client that was within months ago, and he's another 49-year-old male with a history of depression, and he'd had psoriasis for 20 years. A third client is an ongoing client, 36-year-old male. He's got general anxiety disorder, and he's had psoriasis for 19 years. And my fourth client, which I've literally only just thrown in there today just as a demonstration, is an online client. It's a female, with 39-year-old, and did not use IEMT because of complications and contraindications. She's got a long history of depression, and she's had operations on lymph nodes, her heart, and her cervix. So I've not actually been able to use the IEMT, but we did try other techniques to see if that could help. Okay. Now, I've probably got around about 6 or 7 clients with psoriasis on my books at the moment. 2 of them are listed here. 4 of them are local people and people that I'm working with, which is still ongoing. The thing is my first client that I worked with was 5 years ago. I think the paper was published in 2018. The client I worked with is 2016, so it's now 6 years has gone by. What I wanted to do is I wanted to wait at least 5 years to find out whether the psoriasis come back. After 2.5 years, there was no signs of it. 2.5 years, the client reported back to me, he's off all of his medications. And basically, yeah, so I waited another 2.5 years, long wait, 5 years in total, checked up on him again, found out that he's fine. And so that was basically, it was, for me, it was enough information to say, okay, this stuff works. So, you know, let's go on and pick up some more work from it. Okay, so client number 1, 49-year-old male, slim to medium build, standard omnivore diet, no previous psoriasis. From 2009 to 15, he'd suffered with psychogenetic seizures, basically epileptic seizures. 2015, he showed the first signs of psoriasis after a knock to his right hip. 2016, the client had been seizure-free for 5 months. After taking a drug called levetiracetam, I had to break it down because I can never pronounce any of these things. It's a medicine used to treat epilepsy. So the client showed signs of gut bloating and also IBS. February 2016 was when I did my first session with him. Got full signed consent to work with him. There was no exchange of money and no promises of a recovery given. Okay, so this is the first photographs I took before the session. Now, the client it's a bit blurry, took it on a bit of a rubbish phone. That wasn't really expecting to you know, get much from it, to be honest. What you can see there is his hip with and his left on the left armpit with patches just starting. This is 6 months of psoriasis basically start to come through. So I took some better photographs, and if you look at the one on the right hand side there, you can just start to see the skin starting to build up and flake. And on the left hand side it doesn't look so red, but I think that might have just been a filter on the camera. So what we've got here is dry skin plaque starting to form in February 2016. Okay, so what I did is I prepped the client up. He arrived very stressed out. His explanation for that was his family relations and social services involved. He was putting him under a lot of stress to find money to pay for his 2 kids. He explained he had to keep working all the way through the pains in order to keep going. He was taking CBD oil, regularly smoking marijuana and drinking to help him sleep at night. He was also on prescription medications for the seizures. Okay, so I gave him an in-depth discussion of how to proceed, went through what was the most likely cause, and we set a plan to start so that he was toxin-free as much as possible by the 8th of March in order to run the first session. There was no change or advice was made about the prescription medication, so that just stayed the same. So the medication that he was actually on, and looking into that, it's what's called a psychogenetic, it's for psychogenetic seizures. Now, if you look into it, it basically means that it's related to psychological factors. Such things as beliefs, fears, and strong emotions will cause, increase, or prolong pain. And this is what they were attributed his seizures to. Okay. There's strong side effects to this. The drug, sleepiness, dizziness, feeling tired, and aggression. The more severe side effects, which apparently are quite rare, include psychosis, suicide, allergic reactions, such as Stevens-Johnson syndrome, and anaphylaxia, another tricky word. And it's unclear if it's safe to use during pregnancy and breastfeeding. Now, if you look up this drug, the mechanism of action is not clear. They don't know how it works. It's kind of, they just figured out that, oh, look, this thing works. But however, it's the 97th most prescribed drug in the USO. At the time it was, with over 7 million prescriptions. It's now been discontinued and superseded with a new fancy name thing. Okay, so my first session for the IEMT was on the 8th of March. It lasted about 2 hours and 15 minutes from start to finish. And the client was elusive about his past, a bit cagey. He demonstrated a lot of what we call the maybe man phenomena. That's where the client is not really accessing the memories, he's being avoidant, not really getting an experience that he's relating back to me. So I spent a lot of time trying to track for the linchpin with this. Eventually I simply asked him, was there ever a time in your past that was life-threatening, something so traumatic you thought you might actually die? And I said it would be a clear, vivid memory, but time seemed to slow down so much so it was like a slow train crash happening. So straight away he came up and gave me an explanation of what that was, and we worked around it. I'll go through that in a tick. So basically what I'm going to do in between is basically look at what's going on. The bad memories of the client, it triggers the inflammation, and that leads on to psoriasis. So it's your brain's job to keep you alive and quickly move you out of harm's way. So you store bad memories as a way to remain vigilant in case something like that thing comes along again in the future. Okay, if you've had bad memories like vivid images that make you feel bad, it's that which increases your startle response. A triggering of your sympathetic nervous system leads you to having what's called a flare-up. Accumulation of bad memories is what's known as allostatic load. And allostatic load is all the mind's burdens and requires extra glucose, which is sugar, to hold it together. Otherwise, it's a constant drain on the homeostasis, and the ability for you to feel happy or just normal isn't possible. This is what leads to comfort eating, or smoking, or getting intoxicating, or demanding prescription drugs, just to try and feel normal. Remember, each time you get triggered, non-vital organs get switched off. This will eventually make you sick. Bad memories cannot be changed with creams, pills, potions, or lotions. Okay, so this is where, if you want to read the more detail about what I did with this client, it's in the Journal of Experimental Psychotherapy, published in September 2018, and there's a much more detailed explanation of how I work with this client all the way through. And also, if you look at the ResearchGate, there's over 3,000, I think it's about 3,200 reads. So there's been quite a bit of interest on it. Okay. So what I did is, after working with the linchpin, what I identified as the linchpin, went through the K protocol with the guy. 6 weeks later, we see the first session recorded on his mobile phone. This wasn't published anywhere else. I just pulled it off and sent to me. 3 months later, we can see the bloating is still apparent, but obviously the psoriasis marks have reduced. And then the effectiveness after 5 years has passed. The client has got his life together. He's now got a regular steady job and an income. He's access and shares custody of his kids. He lives in a 2-bedroom purpose-built flat, and all the prescription medications have stopped. He stopped drinking alcohol, and he does yoga instead of smoking weed. So before and after pictures. So this was on the left, the 5 years ago, all the medications are stopped. The good, and you can see from the right-hand picture, which was taken just last year, the gut bloating is significantly reduced. The seizures have not reoccurred at all. So not only have we dealt with the psoriasis there, we can also see a reduction of the swelling of the gut, and more importantly, the guy's epilepsy never came back again after the sessions. So, you know, it kind of could have been a lucky shot, could have been, but I do think that basically the IEMT has made a difference here. Okay, so the second client, slim to medium build, physically active, he's a painter and decorator. He's got a long history of depression. At age 12, he was sent to a child psychologist. He's had counselling for drug and alcohol in his mid-20s, recently developed arthritis, which has affected his work and his income stream. Arthritis, psoriatic arthritis usually develops around 10 years after the psoriasis starts to show up on the skin. With this guy, he's had a couple of remissions. The psoriasis was ranging between 25 and 70% of the skin cover. Started when he was 28 years old, and only twice in the whole 20 years has it gone into remission, which was less than half a year each time. So I started on the 21st of November last year, 2021. It was a 90-minute session. Took photos and discussed the process involved, completed in detail its health history, future aspirations, discussed and advised on lifestyle changes, and what he would need to do. So I prepped him up for a direction of how to work on afterwards. I also identified the always at effect pattern, so we disarmed that. Basically, he was under the impression it was there for life, and so he could only ever treat it with medications, etc. Okay, so this is what we got before I started on the 21st of November. Incidentally, this is what he was called being okay. This was a non-flare-up session for him, non-flare-up psoriasis period of time. What you can see there is, you know, the plaques basically covering his torso and his elbow, which also covered all the way down to his legs, and you can see where he's been scratching on his left shin there. Okay, so the first session included exploring a potential linchpin, and I ran the K pattern over that, which is the kinesthetic pattern, the standard IEMT pattern. I only got a 25% reduction in the feelings to memory, so I stopped with it. And then what I did is I explored his mental map. This is another process developed by Andrew Austin, brilliant for basically getting the client to explore his internal landscape. And what it did is it opened up a deeply repressed memory. So what we did is I basically took that mental map and we put it into an image. And the image, what you see in here is basically on the left, you've got the sea. On his right, there was basically nothing there for him, nothing on the road ahead, and the blue skies above. But behind him, what we see is the remains of a burnt down house. This is basically an empty metaphor. There's not much going on in the guy's life, but there is a huge problem that he's kind of running away from, which is behind him. So what I did with that is I identified that there is something there to work with. So we went in and explored a little bit around the house fire and the deep sadness that he was experiencing around it. So the client had a clear memory of coming home from school at age 10 while staying with his mother in a woman's refuge after their house had been burnt down. Some accidents at home. On a scale of 1 to 10, it brought up a rating of 9. It's a very strong sense of deep sadness. This was the first time he'd experienced that feeling of sadness. So we ran the K algorithm and I tested it, reduced it from 9 to 6, so it's a 50% reduction. Okay, the feeling changed after that from deep sadness into a fear, which he experienced and felt in his gut. Now, I was very conscious of quite a big shift within the first 90 minutes. I mean, this guy had been something that he'd been holding on to. Part of his trauma had been there since he'd been 10 years old. So we're looking at really around about 39 years of his life. So there is a lot of adaptations that he's been making to that. And what we've got here is, after running the K algorithm and testing it, a reduction of 50%, I was very much aware that there was quite a lot of shift going on. So instead of running the K pattern with this client again, what I did is I accessed the sense of feeling of fear in his gut. And what I did is I ran the feeling he was having was butterflies in his gut. And anybody that's used the, I've spelled that wrong, Bandler spinning wheel, that should be a B. The bandle and spinning wheel technique basically gets the client to imagine a spinning wheel inside of them and then reverse it in the opposite direction. And it gives them a sense of control of the nervousness that may arise in the future. So I gave him that tool to go away with, and we tested it. And then, I reinforced the new feelings of control using some basic hypnosis techniques. I advised the client to practice this technique every day or whenever he felt those butterflies feeling in his gut. Okay, and then I wrapped up the session. So the second session, a couple of weeks later, took photos, discussed any changes, observations and improvements in his well-being. The client reported he had cold symptoms for the first 3 or so days after the treatment. This is a common thing that I keep coming across. It's as if, the clients are basically releasing toxins from the cells and having a cold symptoms without actually feeling like having it cold. They're getting a snotty nose, they're getting kind of a bit of a dry throat and coughs and stuff like that. So the body seems to be throwing out the toxins. And I've noticed that quite a few times. Also, he hadn't drank any alcohol and he'd reduced his smoking. General mood had improved, and he'd also slimmed down a notch on his belt. So there was a little bit of reduction, maybe IBS. Okay. Close friends were very impressed but thought it was witchcraft when he told them. It's quite amusing. So on the second session, 2 weeks later, this is on the 8th of December, and what you can see there is still a little bit of mapping on the left side of his torso. On the right side, it's pretty much cleared up. It was the same for the elbows. You can still a little bit of dry skin on the elbow, a bit slow there to come up with new skin. But this is literally after one session 2 weeks later. And then the next session, what I did is I worked on about his identity. So basically his fixed beliefs that he developed around being a failure in life. So the me, the you and the self side of his identity all appeared normal. However, his I identity was still lingering around about the age of 28 years old. This was a time when he was having lots of fun. He was partying, drinking and smoking. And also the time when the psoriasis started to appear. His actions and behaviours were still stuck at that time, 20 years in the past. So we ran the lazy 8 pattern around the 28-year-old period, and at that moment he grew up a little. So what we've got here is the results after 3 weeks. On the left-hand side is the 21st of November, and the 15th of December, 3 weeks later, you can see it's pretty much cleared up. So this is basically a great example, which was the first client I worked with after the 5-year period. Since then I've spoken to him. He said he's still got a little bit of dry skin on his elbow, but basically he's happy that it's pretty much cleared up. Okay, so client number 3 is an online client I've worked with. I'm still working with. He's a 36-year-old male. He's got general anxiety disorder and he's had psoriasis since the age of 17. He's had it for 17 years, sorry. So he uses a topical cream, brand name Imposi, or whatever it is. Anyway, it causes adrenaline glands to stop working. This can lead to adrenaline insufficiency. Symptoms can include dizziness, fainting, low blood pressure, and fatigue. Okay, so this is the pictures that I took before doing any work. And what we see here is a pretty heavy sort of plaque psoriasis on the shins, on the front and the back. This was similar also to his elbows, and checking his nails, there was pitting, and the typical thing that you would see with the start of psoriasis, with the arthritis and type of things that you get with psoriatic arthritis. So this is pre-session, January 22. Okay, so on the first session, the client appeared quite apathetic. But what I would explain as lackluster. He was very agreeable and cooperative. However, when we discussed the process, I checked his diet and suggested an increase of omega-3 and reduction of omega-6 foods. We explored what might be the linchpin, but there was no obvious thing. That was feelings related to any memories that he could pull up. Okay, and we tested ways of using the eye movement online, and that was basically the first session done. We set up a second meeting for the 6th of January. And the second meeting lasted an hour. I ran the K protocol on the regret, sensations and the feelings that he had, but there was no clear shift again. We stopped and worked on exploring his landscape and ran a mom session and metaphors and movement session. The client was basically, his metaphor was on a slippery slide, clambering up it, and he could not see what's at the top. There was a volcano to his right, trees to the left, and a pool at the bottom of the slide. So we worked through the metaphor, and some of the idioms that came up, where he spends his life on a slippery slope, struggling to reach the top, even though he doesn't know what's there when he gets there. What's left is to return to nature, possibly go home to his family tree. And what's right for him is potentially massive, but could be dangerous. But this guy works in a high-tech company in California, probably Silicon Valley. I've not really explored too much about his career or what he's doing, but I think there might be some correlation there to the volcanic images that he's getting, potentially massive project he's working on, but it could be dangerous. Anyway, if he was to stop this struggle, he'd have to take the plunge, and that would mean sink or swim. Now, this tended to resonate quite deeply with him. He kind of got it. He said, oh, right, I see what that is. And it motivated him to basically start really, making some changes. So I took some steps into the 4 quadrants, and he found the water was very shallow, which was a surprise. He thought it was going to be deeper. Anyway, we wrapped up the session there. The February the 10th, the client reported rapid weight loss. He basically changed his diet, he cut out most of the carbohydrates, picking on snacking and all that types of food. However, it's unlikely due to the it's likely due to the continuation of the steroid cream he was using and the reduction of the processed carbs for the weight loss. So what you're seeing here is, a couple of weeks later, the actual effect of what I would possibly say is not down to the IEMT. I don't think the IEMT worked in this case. And we can still see the pitting in the nails, which I would normally expect that to clear up after around about 6 weeks time. So that works to be continued. So we've set up another session to work on his guilt issues, and this time the client informs me he's stopped using the IEMT steroid cream. And hopefully what we're going to get from that is I'll be able to calibrate the emotional imprints without the steroid cream suppressing his adrenaline function. Okay, so the 4th client, which is online, it's a female I'm working with. Unfortunately, I'm not going to share any pictures with you. And with this client, I've not used the IEMT process because of complications and contraindications. But I thought it was relevant for me to actually share this with you because the client has got the same similar symptoms. She's got a history of depression. She's had a lot of surgical operations on her lymph nodes, heart and her cervix. The strategy we decided to use because of the contraindications was a strict change of diet and reduction in her toxicity intake. However, after 2 months of guidance around diet, increase in omega-3, vitamin D, fresh food, no alcohol, there's been no improvements. The client's general mood has improved, but no improvements to the psoriasis whatsoever. Okay, so I don't have any images to show you for this. Okay, so basically in summary, what we've got is a common denominator with all the clients I'm suffering. I have interviewed so far as unresolved chronic stress that ranges from anxiety to depression. Medications can work, but because they don't ever address the chronic stress, then other autoimmune problems are likely to occur. Changing your diet alone doesn't work. Okay. And finally, we got through it. To most people, it doesn't matter what their dentist or their hairdresser or their car mechanic or plumber looks like, because if they can do the job, then ask them to do the work. Okay, this should be the same with your mental health. If what you're doing isn't working, find something that does work. With the results I'm seeing, I'm pretty sure everyone could benefit from reducing the allostatic load. And that, I think, is a wrap. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch off the screen sharing and flick it back to Matt so we can go with some questions.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That was great. Let me just add spotlight. Look, I'm there as well. Guys, if you have any questions, please type them into the box. We've already got a couple already. First of all, I wonder why John asked the client had an accident or an incident where the client nearly died. Did he know, or was it a calculated guess? I ask, some trauma is not about actual nearly dying, good stuff, but wanted to ask anyway. So with that client, so you said, you weren't sort of getting anywhere, you asked if he had any sort of issues where he came to nearly dying. So yeah, was that just like a shot in the dark, or did you have sort of an assumption?
Yeah, no, I've got basically, because I've been working with hypnosis for quite a few years, what I first noticed when I started doing it, there is a time shift. So if you're working as say you're basically working with a client with hypnosis and you ask them at the end of the session, how long did you think that session went? What they will normally say is about a third of the time that actually the session lasted for. So if I'm working with a client for an hour and I'll say, how long do you think that lasted for? And they haven't got observation of a clock, they'll say about 20 minutes. So there's definitely something going on with the time shift as a client. Now, if somebody goes into a fight or flight response, right? Somebody is in a high stress, sympathetic response to a dangerous thing happening, a car coming at them or a brick falling off them. What happens is that memory gets coded in, and it's as if it's a slow train crash phenomena. So if somebody's in a car accident, what will happen is time will seem to slow down. Really what's going on there is the brain is actually speeded up to 4 to 6 times faster. And the reason it does that is so that it can code in more data points in order for them to respond to the event that's happening to them. So this really is a reverse engineer of that problem. If I'm asking a client, hey, has there ever been a time when you felt that time had really slowed down? It might have been a moment when you thought you were probably going to die. Then I find that actually helps me to identify the linchpin or something around that moment.
Yeah, so I'm gonna steal that. Okay. Oh, just somebody. I don't know if they actually want me to read that out. Just people saying great presentation. I won't read that out, Kate. I don't know if you want to read that out. If you do, just let me know. Guys, if you want to ask a question in person as well, just raise your hand and I can actually unmute you if you want to raise a question in person. One other one is here. Okay, so interested that you mentioned if the client has an event where he'd nearly died. I did when I was younger a few years ago and had a flare-up of guttate psoriasis, I pronounce, which could be wrong. Another thing here is, have you worked in cooperation to any of these GPs when you've been working with
I
them?
regularly write to clients' GPs or speak to clients and ask them to get, you know, permission or some kind of, you know, feedback, but I don't really get much response from GPs, to be honest. You know, what I'm doing is when I'm working with clients, I gauge it myself whether the contraindications are going to be dangerous or not. If I feel it at any point where it might be crossing the line, I will step back and I won't use the IEMT process. However, saying that, I do use the metaphors of movement, which I think is quite effective online. But the IEMT, the contraindications around IEMT, we're basically playing it safe with that. So I would avoid.
Yeah, I actually get this quite a lot with people saying, can I work with it? And I always say, look, if somebody's actually got a clinical diagnosis, no, not unless you're medically trained or working in cooperation with a GP. You don't want to exacerbate a situation. I have one here. Is there a relation of this to EMDR? I'm not EMDR trained. I should imagine if you're working on, you know, PTSD and traumatic events, and yes,
yeah,
but
it's a good question. I think there is some research that psoriasis has been helped with EMDR. I think it took around about 3 months. Now that for me is not good enough. Usually I would see an effect within around about 3 weeks. And really the reason is for that is because that's all it takes for the skin to actually reset and just stop growing, stop the reproduction of new cells on the epidermis constantly. Cool. So when that stops, then what we see is that the skin that's been constantly flaking off all the time, away, and then new skin comes through, and you might just see some of the mapping underneath.
Yeah, it is kind of quite strange how usual skin complaints is usually something from outside in, you know, a reaction to your environment, but this is obviously an inside out, which, you know, I don't know anything about psoriasis because I've never suffered from it. And I've not worked with anybody. Anyway, we've got a couple.
People with eczema, it's usually caused by an external toxin or poison.
Yeah.
Scratch or something causes a flare up. But the difference is with psoriasis, you often see with plaque psoriasis symmetry across the body. So the top elbow be on this elbow, this knee, this knee. So the body's actually showing us that it's the difference. Whereas eczema will be, you know, one side of the ear or one part of the arm.
Yeah.
Well, normal. Can be symmetrical, but I think there's a little bit of a crossover between them.
We've got a question from Clara. I'm just going to unmute Clara. Clara, if you want to unmute and ask your question, please.
Hi, John. I found that really interesting. I'm not so much sure it's a question, but it's perhaps something that I do with clients. Okay, so I work with a lot of clients who are in work, and most clients that are in work actually find their jobs very stressful. Some of those clients have actually had, I've worked with quite a number with fibromyalgia, and also those, somebody with very severe but frequent migraines. And I have been teaching them to do something on a regular basis throughout their working day. So I recommend that they take regular half-hourly breaks. That in that 5 minute, then they take a 5 minute break. I've discovered, I thought I set it up, but somebody else actually, apparently it's written up as the Pomodoro technique. But the Pomodoro technique doesn't actually tell people to do anything other than take a break. But what I get people to do, because I think that we work in very unnatural ways, and none of us should be, you know, we're animals more than anything else. And so I get people to get up from their desk, to move to the window, hopefully they have one, and to gaze up through the sky. And then I teach them to breathe slowly and deeply in through their nose. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, out for 4, rest for 2, and repeat several times. And what has been very interesting, so I also get them to take to move away from their desk, take a toilet break, get themselves a healthy drink or a healthy snack should they need it. The people with fibromyalgia have reduced their analgesia by about at least 50%. All have reported that they're no longer collapsing in exhaustion at the end of the day. The chap who had very severe migraines, being off for days, numbers about 3 days at a time, 3 or 4 times a month, actually after reported that for the first time in years he'd had no further migraines. And so I'm just, because I think that we do live and are expected to work in ways that actually are stressful and alien to us as human beings, and to help people to actually just soothe their system. You know, I mean, because I don't think we're ever taught to do anything that's actually really to live healthily or to understand ourselves. And also what people find is if they regularly are taking these breaks through their day, and sometimes if they're working on work, they're finding it really difficult to focus, then I say, reduce the amount of time you work before you take a break. Maybe work for just 15 minutes. People are actually getting more work done, making fewer mistakes, and being, generally much happier. So I just thought I'd throw it in.
Cool. Thank you very much. Hey, Matt, what was that title of the book? Quickly.
There was no book.
No, John, sorry.
Which book? The Behave?
Behave, yeah.
So this is the book. It's brilliant. It's very interesting.
Thank
really
you, Clara.
great read. The guy does lots of videos on YouTube. He's basically recorded thousands of hours. A lot based around stress, and but the book goes into a lot of details. Very, very well written, and fun. Interesting and informative.
And was there another book as well, or was it the same book?
No, the book that I flagged up earlier was basically the publication that I had, which
right. And I'll send a link out to that actually, so you can actually read.
So you can read all about the first case study. I didn't go into too much detail. It was 5 years ago. From memory, basically, you're going to get a more accurate picture from.
Okay, I've got just a message from Kim. Kim, please, can you excuse? Okay, we're not going to go into this. Basically, is can you explain the use of your process of metaphors and idioms? We won't go into that because that's not IEMT. So we want to keep this about sort of the IEMT use with it. I think we're going to do some more talks around this anyway. But the thing, the metaphors of movement is a whole different therapy model.
Yeah, it's based about the advanced. It's more of the advanced work around IEMT. It came out from IEMT originally. Yeah. Just basically separated it apart. But it's very good for working online, I find.
So let me just see. I'll just see if Kim that was the same question. She's lowered her hand. Okay, guys, does anybody have any other questions? Please raise your hand or just type them to me. If not, just got a couple of little things to share.
Faces, Matt. I think everyone's camera's switched off.
Yeah, it's just because there's so many people, everyone puts the camera on, it slows the whole thing down. Can cause it to stutter, you see. So because we're recording it, I like people to not.
But there's quite a few messages in the chat.
Yeah, I think we've got to. Okay. What is the IEMT's process? I'm sorry if you've explained this. So the IEMT process.
Yeah. I mean, it's been the 2 days training of the practitioner course is basically a very, very quick technique to learn how to use IEMT. It's like basically doing a driving lesson. After a few years of using it, I mean, Martin and myself have been now, close on to 12 years, I think.
Yeah.
And so after a while, a lot of the things become second nature. You pick up on a lot of the patterns of chronicity pretty much straight away. And the only thing I can suggest with people is just keep getting clients and keep practicing and checking on the feedback and updating and changing your thing. It's a great modality. You know, and I will be running some training around the psoriasis work, advanced psoriasis work that I'll be doing soon. Promise.
And I do have a training coming up for those people who aren't actually trained in IEMT. Also, John, have you worked with anything else apart from psoriasis in terms of physical symptoms and physical conditions?
Well, okay. So what shows up? Psoriasis is a clear thing that you can actually see. But I've worked over the years. I've worked with lots of phobias. I had a client with PTSD recently, and I videoed him. It was the actual coldest day of the year. So I worked with him with PTSD, and it was the coldest day of the year, and he went for a swim in the sea. His PTSD was something from a childhood trauma he had, where he was left accidentally outside in the freezing cold. He almost died. So that lingered with him so long that his house constantly had to be at a temperature of around about 28 degrees, heating on all the time. It was just ridiculous. And so he came to me to see if I could fix that. I made a video on it. I also work with dental phobia, phobias. I've done videos around that. Not that, a bit sketchy, my film recording quality, but it's still, you can still see it. Over the years, I've worked with lots of different things, anxiety issues. I've got a couple of clients I'm working with coaching at the moment, but medical things, no. I think what we've got here is a demonstration, a clear demonstration that you can make a change using IEMT, and it's a little bit, for me, like crossing the 4-minute mile. What we're seeing here is that, hey, if this works for psoriasis, then maybe it could work for autoimmune disease. Now, I've been offering this out for 5 years for free to people, a little bit like PTSD. Can't give it away. People basically don't believe it's possible. They don't believe that you can make a change. The patterns of chronicity, always at effect, never at cause, is so deeply ingrained into the psyche of people with psoriasis and autoimmune diseases, they just basically give up before they try. So again, I mean, I'm pushing there to see if more people will come forward. And I personally believe, the last bit of the finishing off of that bit I did on the video there was, you know, if you try IEMT, then you're going to benefit from it. I think if you actually go and work with clients, instead of trying to fix it and do it yourself, oh, okay, I'm going to learn IEMT and then I'm going to do it myself. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You actually have to do the therapy with somebody else. It's a little bit like trying to tickle yourself and make yourself laugh. You can't do it. Pay for a therapist. It supports us. It keeps us all going. And you will benefit from it. And after all, you know, this is your life. You know, what else could you spend your money on? Another hair salon, another hairdo.
And the thing is, when you do the training, you get an awful lot of work on yourself, you know, because and also I encourage people to do the training to work with each other afterwards. Anyway, I'm gonna have to, we've got quite a few questions coming in and I'm aware of the time. So let me, okay. Are you looking for more clients? I'll let you two connect afterwards on that, because the answer is just contact him. Do you need any qualifications to train in this? No, you don't. Most of the people who I have come to train with me have a therapy background to some degree, or they've had the IEMT themselves and they're like, oh, I want to learn this. So, but you don't need any training or qualifications in this. I agree, people don't want to change. Somebody's working with constipation. She's out of her routine. Okay, be careful how you work with that. I'll do that one online. There seems to be a lot of contraindications with IEMT, and is there any particular reason why? I can give you a quick answer, then John can give you another answer as well. We're actually changing people's neurology. No, when you move somebody's eyes, you're actually changing how people are accessing problems. You're changing your basis to do with like brain plasticity. It's not talking therapy. It's not mindfulness. You're actually creating neurological change. So you don't want to exacerbate a condition. And the thing is, with IEMT as well, somebody can come do a 2-day course and basically work with anyone. But you don't even do a course, you can just watch some online videos. The thing is, if you're not medically trained to deal with an outcome, then you shouldn't be working with that client. And also people who are on, if they're on sort of SSRIs or different kinds of medication, they're not actually feeling their feelings properly. They're being, dulled, so that you're not actually working on the problems. And so basically, it's just, IEMT is incredibly powerful. And you need to make sure that you're working with people that you're not going to exacerbate their problems who aren't under a physician, a doctor's care or psychiatric's care. John, would you agree with that? Anything else to add? And
the contraindications, basically we're playing on the safe side. I think what I'm doing here is I've kind of crossed a line. I've seen changes happen in people. And when the opportunity came up to try and work with psoriasis, I thought, well, okay, well, I'll jump at that and see if I can get some people to work with. Now, there was a lot of paperwork initially. There was a lot of, consent forms from the client. There was a lot of basically stuff that they had to sign, which basically said to them, if anything goes wrong, then, you've signed your life away, blah, 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 blah. This puts people off in itself, and so I basically worked with this guy, and I know he was on medications for his epileptic seizures. He had been stable for 5 years. I've worked with people with epilepsy before. I can deal with it. It doesn't frighten me. And so I felt quite confident to go in and actually work specifically with the psoriasis. Now, I wasn't expecting to get the results with the epilepsy. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but I don't think so. I think what we've got there is a possible technique that can actually approach more autoimmune issues and more.
Yeah, I agree.
Obviously, there's a lot of people out there that are not going to be happy with that because they've been struggling for so many years, and I'm not the doctor. And I'm not the psychiatrist or the guy with all of the medical qualifications after my name, and I don't care to have them, to be honest. I'm basically working on the results basis.
Yeah.
If I get the results, then I'll continue doing the work.
Same here.
Send me the clients, send me the people through, and I'll work on them. That's all I can say.
We have another question from Susan. Let me just unmute Susan.
Hiya. I've also written in the chat, but I don't know if it's come through. Just, you mentioned before one of your clients reported cold-like symptoms after they'd had IEMT session, and I recognised that when he said it. I thought, oh blimey, I thought it was just a coincidence. But also I noticed people report feeling extremely down the following couple of days after IEMT when they've had a lot of change during the session. I wonder how you respond to that.
I'm not sure. It's a bit of a phenomenon, and I thought that's why it's worth mentioning. My take on it is it's quite possible that the cells in our body, of which we've got about 1 trillion cells, kind of hold on to some toxins, or maybe the body's basically working on repairing some of those cells. And what they're doing is they're clearing out the excess toxins that would normally line up the body or wherever, and it has to come out somehow. And the way the body gets rid of stuff like that, it comes out in like having a snotty nose, and basically the synovial fluids and things like that come out through having, like, similar to what a cold does. So I don't know. It's interesting. And thanks for mentioning that, because I thought I was the only. It was just an observation that I had.
I have people have like a lot of weird dreams and just feel a bit weird. But I always say it's like purging. It's like actual purging. So a lot of it will come through dreams. I don't try understand them, and this is why you've got to give your sessions a week. I always do it the same. Because you've got to give it a week to really kind of process and come out. And by the time, I don't know, John, you've probably seen, well, obviously you have seen because of the physical changes, but when I see a client a week later from what I've seen them before, they physically look so much different because there's so much stress that's been alleviated in their body. And so they look so different. Their skin looks different, literally, not just from psoriasis, but they just look healthier. They just look happier. They just look freer, you know. It's and I get this constantly reported.
You get it in a session. Sometimes you can get it in a session. Halfway through a session, it's as if the face lights up. It's as if they see it leaving that stress. And I don't know if it's just a figure of my imagination, but I've recognized it quite a few times.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would normally expect with working with trauma stuff, especially, first thing I would get some kind of physical lighting up of the person during the session. They might laugh. And laughter to me is something I kind of looked into. It's a way the body naturally deals with stress.
Yeah.
Laughter is it gives off in a frequency of an average of about 5.5 hertz, and that's a measurement taken across the world. Now, anyone who's worked with hypnosis knows that theta brainwaves, dead center of theta, which is the bit where the conscious meets the unconscious, so to speak, the part of the brain that resonates at between 4 and 7 hertz is called theta. Dead center in the middle of that is 5.5 hertz. So the average person, when they're laughing, what's happening there is that punchline or the stress response that they've been hanging on to all of their life suddenly gets released in like a slow clutch response, like a frequency. And what happens is that releases a neurotransmitter called serotonin. And we all know of serotonin being a neurotransmitter of the happy hormone, so to speak. But most of it is in the gut. So when we laugh, we get this shuddering of a guffaw of a belly laugh. And I think that's basically the counterbalance for the stress that actually got released in the adrenaline glands prior to the first thing that happened. So what we've got there is serotonin, comes from the word seron and toner. Serotonin, what it does is it gets all of the cells regulated and in harmony again. It gets them all holistically tuned in and working in harmony again. And if you've ever read any William James, it's a guy who talked about this kind of mental health. He was a psychologist way back 100 years ago. And he says we don't laugh because we're happy because we laugh. And really what you've got there is when you've got a client in a session and they're basically thinking about that traumatic thing, and all of a sudden you wiggle their eyes and they start laughing, okay? What you've got there is basically an indication of the first sign that something's changed. And then afterwards, what I'd expect from that is a couple of days later, the client will report to me they might have had a bit of cold symptoms while they're purging of some of the toxins. And then later on, you get a huge, quick drop in weight. They might drop 4 or 5 pounds. And what I would say that is possibly is the fuel tank, which is our liver, which stores a hell of a lot of water and sugar. And that basically is keeps topped up all of the time. And once they start balancing the homeostasis, then the reserve of that basically gets washed out, and it helps to clear the fat and the liver and the water that's been contained in that. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, you start the new skin starts to come through. So there's actually a direct process. And what I'm checking for in the follow-up sessions is to find out any feedback or observations or things that they've noticed in the session.
Okay, we've got a couple of last questions. If I can ask you just to make these questions as quick as possible, and then we're going to let everybody go. Well, they are already at home. So we have Clara. Oh, somebody's just gone off. So Clara, if you have a quick question, let's go.
Hi, I'm just wondering, when you say, John, that when you can see the people released, you can see them sort of relax, and the skin looks better at that moment. I'm just sort of wondering, would you say that the explanation may be that the fact that they are letting go of that chronic stress which shuts down on their system, actually they're getting circulation to their skin, you know, and that also might explain their loss of weight, because actually if they've got good circulation through their body, then actually their cells would be flushed too.
Yeah,
Sort of
yeah, this is it. I think what we do when we're holding chronic stress, then the body puts a lot of stuff in reserve. It will basically, the liver will hold around about 2 days of sugar, water and sugar in there, and it keeps us topped up like that, so we're constantly ready to supply the big muscles for the fight and flight response. When you basically relieve them of that chronic stress, what happens is over the next few days that tends to drain out and they'll notice a quick loss of weight. With the client I was working recently, I'm still working with in California, he reported about 10 pounds of weight lost over a period of about 3 weeks. So
Wow.
naturally, that's not something really I would encourage, but basically his change of diet and the reduction of carbohydrates and everything, it's something that I would expect. And this is what you would see when you basically go onto one of these quick calorific reduction diets. Basically you would join one of these brand new fads or this new diet, go through all the procedures, and what actually happens is because you've got a control, a way of something to change your system, what happens is that's the liver just empties out. But what you don't get is because you're not removing the chronic stress, then the thyroid gland is still is being starved of the iodine that would normally come from digestion, and it doesn't have the iodine in order to create the hormones in order to increase your metabolic rate. So basically, what's called the basal metabolic rate is what determines how much weight that we are. So somebody basically who's got chronic stress would have to keep eating in order to get the short bursts of sugar in order to keep them flowing. So they're running their body off the fuel that's in the liver rather than burning off the ketones in their body. So you remove the chronic stress, and what you're going to get over time is a reduction of the IBS. You're going to get weight loss, general weight loss to their normal weight or whatever their set weight should be for their particular genetic structure. And then over time, I'm getting feedback from clients saying they're making better life decisions, they're a lot clear-headed, they're not so aggressive, they've got concentration is improvement. So these are the side effects of working with IEMT, as opposed to the option of taking suppressants for your immune system or affecting your adrenaline glands or affecting whatever's going on in your body to suppress all of that. There's going to be knock-on effect, which is serious over time. It's going to cause serious implications over time. And I think what we've got here with IEMT is actually an intervention which basically does get to the root, or close as possible to the root of the problem. And I'd like to see more work and more effort put into looking to see if we can actually approach and deal with other autoimmune diseases,
We've got a couple of last questions here. You seem to know a lot about vitamins and changing diet. How are you able to know this and advise on this? And then a second question, which we can both take, is do you experience a difference in success using IEMT online versus face-to-face?
First question, basically, yeah, I did suffer with IBS myself many years, ignored lots of advice, and so I spent a long time with problems with GERD, so I had acid indigestion, I had gut problems and bloating for quite a few years. Personally, I discovered after many trial and error sessions that I was allergic to wheat, particularly I found that around about the 1980s or 90s, wheat got changed from the normal standard height wheat, which you'd run through the fields, and it would be the hand up to your head when you're a kid, got changed to dwarf wheat. And what happens with wheat is the husk of the wheat, the plant itself, because plants don't really want to be eaten, and especially plants which aren't fruiting plants, they basically they try to avoid herbivores from grazing animals from eating them. So what they do is they put a bit of toxin, a bit of poison around their seed. And if you're eating a particular type of bread regularly on the same day, basis every single day, your favorite type of bread, and it comes from the same gene as that wheat, then you're going to get a buildup of that specific toxin in your system. I became, allergic to it, and it constantly caused problems with IBS. So I spent many years studying around what works and what doesn't work. Don't have the problem anymore. Don't have any digestion issues anymore. Thankfully, I managed to crack it and work it out.
Excellent.
So yeah, I do think on the last note on that, I do think there is a deficiency of omega-3 in our diet. Basically, processed food takes out omega-3 because it makes it decay too quick.
Yeah.
That's the reason that's taken out. And so it's something that everyone should have a look at, really. What was the second question?
So working online versus face-to-face.
Yeah, I'm basically still practicing working online using IEMT. Personally, I prefer face-to-face because I like to be able to track the eye movements of my clients. So I see clients at home for our sessions here. And what I'm doing there is in real time, I can track any saccades. So anybody who's trained in IEMT notices that when the brain is moving across, because basically the eyes are two bits of the brain that's popped out. They're not separate from the brain. They are the brain that you're looking at. And so when we're doing the eye movements across the axes there, any parts of the brain where the person is basically looking to avoid it, or there's areas which are more dense or whatever, what we'll see is the attention of the eyes will jump over that spot, and we'll call them saccades. And normally what happens there is another image jumps in, or a sound, or some experience. And that way, in real time, I can actually track what's going on and ask them questions. And it's those questions which help them break up the emotional impact of the traumas that they've been having. Online, it's hard to do that because there's always a bit of a lag moving the eyes. The screens are very small, so you don't get the same distance across the eyes. But, it's work in process. If we can come up with a method.
Yeah, well, because I've had clients online for 6 or 7 years. I now do all my trainings online, and I teach my people who are doing the trainings how to work online predominantly, because that's just the way the world is now. So personally, I do prefer, if I've got a client face to face, it'll be better. But, working online is a good second place. For me, it's not too far down. So personally, I do prefer working with people face to face. But a lot of my clients are in America and Australia and California, all over the place. It's quite hard to get to, London. So I have sort of worked out ways of making it as effective as possible, but I've been doing it a lot though online. So
yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm sort of, just to finish that bit off, is the way that I work with IEMT is it's basically, there's a basic rule of how the brain works, and that is that we can only really pay attention to one thing at a time. Yes, we can multitask, we can walk, we can talk, we can juggle, we can do all different things. When it comes to attention, we can only pay attention to one thing at a time. And that's basically how the brain works. Now, if I'm getting my client to pay attention to that traumatic event, what I want them to do is externally take their attention out and look at my finger. So as they're watching my finger across the screen, their attention is not internally and amplifying that traumatic event, which is what I'm looking for, a reduction of that to a certain point, so then I can build in some resources. And instead of it going back to the triggering event, what happens is it then's got a response rather than a reflex reaction. And that's basically why I think that working face-to-face is more effective.
I agree with you. I do think it's more effective. However, I do think working online is also effective. And I think that, again, the way that sort of the world's going, it's what we have. And it's like we weren't allowed to do trainings online until, into the pandemic. But if we didn't, IEMT may have come to a bit of a standstill. Guys, thank you so much for joining tonight. I just want to, before we go, I just want to go a couple of things. Let me just put this into the chat. Guys, if you can stay around for literally just 1 minute. Let me just, we have another chat with next week. And This is, all right, I'll do it to everybody. This is with Alan Johnson. Alan Johnson does a lot of physical stuff in regards to pain. Okay, so he's going to be doing a lot of stuff with regards to pain. John, I'm just going to unpin you just for a moment because I'm just going to share my screen. I've just got a couple of slides, that's all. So this is Alan, and he'll be on with us next week at the same time. I've put the link there so you can just register straight away. I'll also send this out to you in a link as well. So that's Tuesday, the 8th of May. He's another trainer who actually trained with John and myself to become a trainer of IEMT. And again, it's just going to be a similar kind of thing, basically how he works with PTSD and IEMT and combining that with basically old pain to go. So he does a lot of trauma-based work. So if you're interested in trauma, which is a weird interest to have, next week is going to be hugely beneficial to attend as well. So people do ask about the actual trainings themselves. I just want to tell you about a training which I've got coming up. Basically, it's a 2-day course. So if you want to train into this, you've got to do case studies and stuff afterwards as well. It's from 9 till 5 on both days, and that's GMT as well. You get a 14 hours of CPD, which is continued professional development. It's all held virtually on Zoom. Now, I do limit this from between 12 to 16 people, absolute maximum. And it costs £397. There's no VAT or anything. There's the only other charge is a £50 annual charge, and that's to the association. But they give you a lot of help and support. And there's also private forums, and there's videos and trainings. And it's on the 19th and 20th of March. So I think it's like not this weekend, 2 weekends after. I have 3 spaces left. If you're interested, just drop me a message. I'm not on Facebook at the moment. I've just been barred from Facebook because somebody hacked into my account today and put on 32 images of indecent images. So I'm not on Facebook, but my email is matt@iemtacademy.com. On your confirmation emails, you will have them. I'm not hard to find. It's just matt@iemtacademy.com. Just message me on there and we can chat. And what's included, basically you get the manuals and the trainings in advance. You get a 2-day virtual training, 14-hour CPD, a full recording of the course as well, a post-training aftercare package with loads of stuff in there. And I get, this is out of date, Facebook group. So you can do email, phone and WhatsApp support. And I'm always around to help with people on this. And then, sorry. And basically, you do get a discount if you want to repeat it as well. And I'm also going to do a monthly Q&A and practice session, which is something that I'm bringing in. So if you are interested in training, I'll stay around for a little bit as well. You can actually just message me directly here and we can set up a time to chat about it. There's no big upsell. I don't have anything for you to actually book onto at the moment. In fact, it's on Eventbrite, isn't it? But if you are interested in doing this training, it is absolutely amazing. And I'm just really excited to sort of see where it's going to go as well. So John, thank you so much. It's been absolutely amazing having you on, and it's been a real sort of insight into, you know, what IEMT can be used for. And I think as well, it can really sort of show what else it could possibly be used for in the medical and psychology world. So guys, thank you so much for joining. This has been the first one of this series, which I've been doing. I'm going to be doing probably about 1 or 2 a month. If you have anything in particular you want covering or any particular person that you want interviewing, drop me a message and I'll do what I can to sort that out. Just, I can't message them on Facebook. I can't believe I'm barred from Facebook. I spend all day on Facebook. Guys, if you want to say thank you in the chat, please do so.
Before I go, can I just say before I go, if anybody does want to contact me or ask any more questions afterwards, then just just drop me a line, johnmartinmoore@hotmail.com, and I'll pick it up. We can have a chat, maybe, you know, sort of see.
And what's your website as well?
Just johnmartinmoore.com.
So perfect. All right, guys, if you do want to unmute yourself to say thank you and bye, please do so. Thank you so much, John. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely great. So wait a minute, I've not allowed people to unmute themselves. Oh, people can unmute themselves. That's absolutely fine. If people want to unmute themselves, they should be able to. Oh, that's right. Yeah. The tick was there.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you
John.
so much.
Thank you very
It was
much.
amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much, John. That was brilliant. I
Thank
shall
you.
email you.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank
I'll
you.
come back, do another one with Matt later on.
Yeah, we will.
You know,
Once I get back on Facebook.
get some more updates.
Thank you, John. That was perfect at time because my husband was just diagnosed with psoriasis.
Oh,
So, and I'm an IEMT practitioner, so I'm going to be exploring
yeah,
with
give it a shot. You know, you should have enough info there to things to look out for. You know, and if you need any help, give us a shout. You know, I can maybe help you direct it.
Yeah, that's great.
That's
Thank
very
you.
good, John.
Thank you, and looking forward to the next session. Thanks.
Yeah.
See you
Okay.
later.
All
Remember
right.
to sign up for next week, guys, as well. Okay, just click on that link and you'll be signed up straight away. And always remember to check your spam and whatever folder. I'm getting emails from people going, "Why aren't you on Facebook? I thought you lived at Facebook." And I'm like, "Yeah, I do live at Facebook."
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Again, like, it's been absolutely great. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, well, there's no. I believe John has gone. It's just me, right? How are we all doing? Is everyone good? Let me just bring everyone.
Matt, you said you're going to do a regular slot like this because I found it absolutely amazing and helpful. Is this going to be a regular thing you're going to do? I know you're very, very busy, but I really have these speakers and everything like this is really good for us all moving forward.
Yeah, I'm going to be interviewing Andy Austin as well. He's going to be coming on to talk about how the brain communicates with the body and some of the stuff which I don't understand at all. We're going to be doing I've got quite a few people. I'm also going to be interviewing some clients about their experience, some other IMT practitioners about how they're using it with what they're doing. And also it gives you the actual chance to interact with them and ask the questions as well. So yeah, I've been waiting for some medical things to come through. I've actually got some today, so I hate cancelling stuff. But now things are like settling down a little bit. I will be doing stuff. I will be doing for all the people who train with me, or who have trained with me as well, who train with me in future. I'm going to do a monthly Q&A and practice session. So that's not interviewing anybody. That's going into slightly deeper into techniques. I'm also doing a full coaching IEMT in a coaching format, and that will be a whole day training, basically how you use the format of coaching with a client and how you use the IEMT tools to work within that. Because some people say, I have this client, but I don't know where to start or what to do. So basically, I've devised this whole system. It's called Back to the Present, which I thought was quite cool. And basically, we use the wheel of life from coaching. We look at people's sections of life, so it could be health, friendships, relationships, and we look at exactly, and we're able to measure everything. We use all the techniques to get them from where they are to today before you start building goals out in advance. And that's going to be a masterclass day. I haven't written it yet. I will be writing that soon. And like I say, that'll be a day event. But yeah, so I will be doing a lot more events. If you have anybody in particular that you want me to interview in regards to IEMT, please let me know. And I will have to use LinkedIn now to contact them rather than Facebook.
I don't know how to use LinkedIn. I'm terrible with technology.
Okay. So yeah. Cool. So many nice messages. All great. No, it was great. Guys, thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions for me? John's gone, so you're stuck with me now. If anyone has any questions, anything to say, refund requests. Gary's thinking, how do I get free back? Can I charge my time? But next week
was good today. Really, really good. Really
excellent.
Yeah.
No, he's
never thought you could use that for it.
No.
Never thought it at all.
Be in touch about the training. Okay, cool. Yeah, if anybody just email me about the training. Like I say, I'm going to be doing them monthly, and I haven't been able to do as many as I want just because I literally I'm waiting for a medical thing to be sort of booked in, which has been fun. I was going to say I'll announce on Facebook. Oh, I can't believe I'm missing Facebook. This is the worst breakup I've ever been through. I've just broken up with 4,500 people. Any other questions? Anything to ask about IEMT at all?
No, that's it. right, I'm going anyway. So
Gary, have you been using it since the course?
Yeah, I've done it. Yeah, I've used it 2 or 3 times, and I've found it really, really useful. I haven't used it as much as I want to, but yeah, it's been really good.
Brilliant. Mark, how about yourself?
I've used it a couple of times. Again, not as quite as much as I would like to. Opportunities are far and few in Stoke-on-Trent, I'm afraid. But I'm actually busy working with someone at work at the minute who's going through a bit of a narcissistic abuse.
Wow.
And I'm trying to convince him to participate, but he's a little bit reluctant, to say the least. But I think we'll get there.
Okay, cool. And like I said, the thing is as well, you know, we can do it online. So it doesn't matter where you live, do it online as well. Cool. Thank you, everyone who's messaging me. That's all great. Any other questions? Robert Smith, how you doing, man? Are you still there?
I'm here.
Robert, now Robert, you're sort of an interesting person because you use this, you do, is it Bowen's technique?
Yeah, I do various kind of soft tissue work that's mostly like sort of like neuromuscular correction stuff. So it's quite remedial kind of work, you know. And so yeah, I had an interest in playing around with IEMT as part of helping people with pain. I mostly focus on chronic pain because my belief is that chronic pain problems are more locked into neurological expectation and sensitization of pain. And so I often explore the history of memory and trauma connected to chronic pain stories using IEMT.
Cool.
And it's worked well.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other questions? Or are we all done with this and we can all go back to our lives and cry into my friendless world on Facebook, Friendsbook, Facebook.
Talking of detoxes, this is a good detox for you, Matt.
Don't want to.
Hopefully it's not too long.
I like being topped.
I can see you're suffering already.
Yeah, I might go on to Snapchat. I don't even know what that is. I'm going to be on TikTok. Well, my nephew's on Snapchat. He's 18. He's not on Facebook because he says it's for old people, which I suppose is right. All right, then, guys, I'm going to send out the link to the recording of this. I'll get this up pretty soon. Please do visit the IEMT support group and just sort of take care of it whilst I'm not there. You can't post any new comments, but you can certainly post under the old posts and just have a chat, and I'll be back soon. All right, guys, thank you so much for attending this evening. It's been great. Thank you very much. See you later. Have a good night. Take care. Bye.